Mr. Cheney's name was still misspelled in the minutes, so.
Mr. Swales.
Oh yeah, there was a typo with that.
Need to switch the I and the L. Any other changes or?
So she corrected Mr. Cheney's.
Yes, it is incorrect in members present, but correct. Or approval of the minutes is where it's incorrect. Am I?
Right.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other modifications that we need to touch on or address? If not,
Not that I can think of.
I'm sorry.
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
All right. I move for approval as changed.
Hearing a motion in a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes approved. Staff update. Mr. Davis, are you? Sorry to bother you away, but we'll turn the floor over to you.
I am here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
All right. Well, good to see everybody. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I'm actually in Dallas, attending my son's wedding, which went well.
Nice.
And I'll be back soon. Staff update. Well, first of all, we are continuing to work on community engagement. I think, is Margaret there?
No.
Not yet.
No. Okay. Well, we are working on community meetings for various communities around the county and engagement with different trade groups. The Chamber of Commerce is actually working on a developer forum for our for-profit developers that we actually have not yet met with. So that should be pretty interesting. And we also have a meeting coming up with our nonprofit developers to talk about their pipeline and how we would work with them to provide some additional units for the county. The other thing I wanted to discuss during the staff update is just how we intend to proceed with the remainder of this process until we get to the final plan. And I think one thing that made it clear from the staff perspective last night was that things are getting sort of convoluted in terms of the plan versus the funding source for the plan. And I wanted to make it clear that the funding source for the plan is a little bit beyond staff purview. So we're going to be separating those two conversations to make sure that we are not crossing any boundaries and stepping outside of our authority and jobs as staff. So getting more people here. I think what I'd like everybody to be clear on is from here on out, I guess we will be working with the consultants to present a plan to the committee that the committee can then vote on, make changes, what have you, and send to council as a committee recommendation. And if that differs in any way from the staff recommendation, then council would essentially get two recommendations. But I don't think there'll be a whole lot of differentiating on the points in the plan. But when we begin to talk about the funding source for the plan, a couple things that everyone needs to understand is that the consultants have been contractually committed to assisting the committee and council with coming up with different funding options. And I think because the referendum was the one that was already on the table, it sort of took on a life of its own and started moving down that track. And that's certainly understandable. But I think staff, number one, needs to be extricated from that conversation. And the consultants, in order to fulfill their contractual obligation, needs to be inserted into that conversation. So not just a presentation by the consultants and then discussion by the committee. It needs to be a discussion including the consultants and the committee in the actual discussion. And staff will provide whatever information is necessary to that, but we will not be pushing any particular agenda, and we will not be a part of the quote unquote conversation. So I think and I've already spoke to the chair and the vice chair about that. I think we are all on the same page with that. So, staff will be leading the planning portion with the consultants, but the consultants will be engaging with the committee in order to talk about a funding source. And I think our perspective as staff is that we will present a plan that will require some funding source to be executed, and that will be pretty much the extent of our involvement in that conversation. So that being said, I think that's pretty much it for the staff update, and we can move on to the next item.
Thank you, sir. Justin and Miriam, we'll turn it over to you for a quick update, and then we can roll into discussion. But like a little, what you've been working on the last couple weeks, and we can tee it up and go from there.
Good. Miriam's got a few slides here that we'll walk through, and I think, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I actually, unlike other times, hear the space that you're in and just making sure that I'm getting to you. Great. So we've got a quick update of some actions and things that we're doing now, and then something to tee up. I think the conversation about where we're going forward with the housing strategic plan and just other conversations that we need to have. Go ahead, Miriam. And just a quick overview on where we're at. We're here early July, working through a variety of planning activities on community engagement that we'll get into. Got some specifics on some surveys, community meetings that we want to talk about. Really nothing much has changed. Wanted to kind of highlight, we've talked about the strategic framework being available in August, and really what we're thinking about moving forward, we're on track for that, and really planning to engage the council on August 9th and really kind of hone in on what that strategic framework looks like. So I think there's some conversation about whether or not the steering committee is going to have an extra meeting in July to see that before the council meeting. That may be the only sort of refinement to this schedule that we've got right now, but we're still on track to have a community survey and some community workshops in September and October. Next slide. So we'll just start going through. We want to talk about the community engagement updates. I'll kick that off with, we had a couple of municipal staff listening sessions. Miriam and I tag teamed those. I thought they went really well. It's always good conversation about the nuts and bolts of zoning and incentives and what's going on already. It was a conversation also about how do we effectively engage with the communities. And it was a really good sort of staff level conversation around some of the nuts and bolts of what's ultimately going to be strategies and where it might be most effective to roll out different types of strategies. So we're already thinking about that and then thinking about it from that community engagement standpoint. Those happened at the end of June. The community workshops. We are planning to be in town in early mid-September there. As you can see, September 12, 13, and 14. We're going to anticipate having 3 community workshops. As you can see there, Charleston, North Charleston, and McClellanville is sort of the target areas that we're proposing to have those workshops. over that 3-day period. We're also kicking around an idea to do another engagement with the Chamber of Commerce. Obviously, we will also have an opportunity for our regular steering committee. I think it's going to be a great time to hear from the community, let you know at least a quick blush on the 14th. What have we been hearing, and to kind of start to wrap our heads around really refining and refining with the community input, not just the analytics that we've been doing, what the goals and strategies might be. Just some real quick points on the community workshops. You know, a lot of this is education. It's awareness. It's saying, hey, you know, you may have heard that we're doing a plan, and actually I want to say that there will be some communication, some media outreach through July and August in anticipation of those workshops. So people will hopefully have been hearing about us and hearing about the plan. So really raising awareness about it, educating people around the goals and the variety of strategies, the issues and needs that we're trying to accomplish and meet, and then get that input again from sort of the, what do we think, you know, like the user and experience side of this, and how much of it is validating and jiving with the data, and how much of it might give us some nuance on how we would implement the strategic plan. We're going to follow up the live meetings that week with a virtual town hall the following week for anybody who couldn't make it and would be able to do it virtually. We'll do that. And then there's going to be a variety of other outreach and community conversations that Daryl's department will be facilitating over that July, August, September timeframe. So we just want to make it clear that, you know, these are the formal opportunities where they're engaging with us as the consultant team and the planning team in person and virtually through this process, that there'll be other outreach opportunities. You want to say a little bit about the survey?
Yeah, I'm trying to get the slide to advance here. Sorry.
Technology.
Come on. Okay, here we go. So the other community engagement update here is a community survey. And so this will be kind of one of the tools that the Housing Neighborhood Revitalization Department will have as they're going out, doing the outreach in July, August, September with neighborhood groups, with, faith groups, etc. Also, just a quick check. Am I sharing the right screen here?
Yes, I see the goals of the survey.
Yeah, great. All right, thank you. And so every survey is different, right? So we wanted to share kind of a little bit about the plans for this survey, and not just kind of what it will include, but, why? What are the goals for this survey? What is the intent? What do we hope to get out of it? And here are some of those goals that we have in mind. So, number one, even though it's a tool to collect feedback, it is also very much a tool to very broadly inform community members about the plan. So in the survey, it will have, information about the plan, information about where to learn more, and it will communicate, here are the needs, and here is why certain strategies are under consideration. And so, the second point here too is provide that education, not just about the strategic options, but about the needs, and help people see kind of how the county, how the steering committee are thinking about this through the planning process. Surveys in comparison to the types of roundtable listening sessions that we've done, or the community workshops we're planning, and so on, can be a good complement, because they do just have this potential for much broader, though less deep, but still much broader reach. We're not asking nearly as much time of participants as we would be asking them to come to a workshop or an hour-long roundtable or anything like that. It's just a quick way for people to engage in the process, and we're trying to set up the outreach around the survey so it's something that people will encounter in kind of spaces they may be frequenting anyway. So whether that's, maybe it's their church or their neighborhood organization, social media, of course, other traditional media, kind of bringing it to people, in addition to asking people to, join us at workshops and things like that. So really intended to be a complement to other engagement methods that may be designed for a little bit of that deeper deliberation. And, the fourth goal here, of course, is to get real, genuine input and feedback to help us refine the plan and guide the kind of implementation considerations. So really getting people's input and take on of all of the possible tools, which will be presented in plain language, jargon avoided at all costs or defined, which are the ideas that people feel good about, which do we see kind of relative consensus on in the community. That I think will be really valuable information. It may not mean we toss out ideas that there aren't consensus on, right? But it will inform the rollout of the plan and the specific approach to any given strategy. Maybe there's a need for additional education or engagement around things that we, as steering committee county, feel could have a lot of impact, but there's not yet, the buy-in there with that. And if we identify, consensus around key ideas, that's really helpful information too. We'll also, in the survey, be asking everybody for a little bit of information about themselves, including what zip code do they live in. So we'll be able to disaggregate the data by the location where residents are responding. We'll also be asking whether they own or rent a home. We can disaggregate that way, as well as age groups and racial or ethnic backgrounds to make sure we're hitting a representative group of county residents. And, it's always our experience that, other good ideas come out of these surveys. And so, we don't want to discount that either. So additional strategies not yet under consideration that we need to bring into the plan as we refine the strategic framework. So that's a little bit about the why, and then a little bit about the what. So we're planning digital version using an online survey tool, as well as a hard copy paper version. As we know, a lot of people don't have easy access to a computer or even a all conversations that to libraries to service partners and helping to circulate those hard copy surveys and help us collect data. We'll be doing translation to Spanish, so we'll have English and Spanish language versions, and then, we're really trying to get it down to something that people could complete in under 5 minutes, so, no longer than one sheet front and back, and that means we're not asking a lot of really back our reach. So we have a draft and internal review with county staff and our team, and then targeting a launch later this month. So hopefully by the next time we meet, we'll have an update for you all on the survey. But we're excited that this has come from.
And Miriam, before you move on, let me just say, I just want to kind of acknowledge a couple of things with the survey as we've conceived it here. I think it's really important to think about this survey, kind of where we are in the phase and the fact that it is complementing other engagement methods. As we continue to get more publicity and more awareness rolled out, and this survey being a part of that raising of awareness, it's 100% that we will be contacting, the people, this will be people's first contact with the housing strategic plan. For other people that we have been engaging or that are just very interested in this and have been following the process, it won't be their first time, and they may look at this survey and they may already be thinking, 2 steps ahead of where we are. So I think I just wanted to kind of emphasize that, this is accomplishing that awareness goal, that education goal, helping us get at those priorities and understanding what the priorities are and how people across the county might be thinking of this issue differently. And all of that is going to help us as we move into those September engagements, where it is going to be, more personal and at those workshops. So I just wanted to throw that out there as something that kind of emphasizes this is where we're at in the process, but also, so we're going to be getting a lot of new people, and we're going to be talking to folks that have been engaged, and hopefully getting them all kind of to a point where we're having some really informed conversations at the workshops. Go ahead, Miriam. So, next, we just wanted to provide a little bit of an update on the strategic framework review. Next slide. Well, one of the things that we've been doing, that was a big conversation, getting to this framework and understanding the goals and the emerging strategies within those goals have been what we've talked about with you all over the last couple of meetings. Here they are again. The goals themselves really haven't, changed. But what we did is we started to hear feedback from you all about some of the strategies, some of the messaging around those strategies, just how some of, the issues of housing need, and the strategies that we might be putting on the table might be butting up with other community conversations around resiliency and sustainability, for example, and how we don't want to set those off against one another. So let's work on some wording. So we certainly took those conversations over the last couple of meetings to heart and have made some refinements to that. And we're going to quickly walk through the strategic framework again with the 5 goals. And we're not going to revisit every single one of the list of strategies. I think Miriam's going to highlight where we have made some changes and want to get people focused on kind of the issues that are really jumping out with each of the 5 as we start to set up a conversation with you all about priorities and timeline and the timing of things as we start thinking about what the strategies and implementation of those strategies look like. So, where we're at with this process, as I said, we were starting to make some refinements based on the conversations we've already had, but we really need to start honing in on the strategy portion and not the goal portion. So we want to get feedback from you all. We want to know, what's missing. We've got a lot of ideas. We're putting them in there within this goal framework, but it's obviously possible that we could be missing something that you want to bring to the table for us to consider, or for all of us to consider. What should be removed? Again, if there's whether it's outright removal or just we need to be thinking about it in a very specific way that isn't clear, we need to hear that from you. And then, as I said, we want to start getting to the priorities, the timelines, and thinking about how soon do we want to work on some of these. What's the long game? What should we be doing first, or maybe not putting as much attention or resources to? We're wanting to get all of this feedback in the next week or so as we move forward to really giving the council an update of the framework and to really see kind of the emergence of the priorities within that framework. And we're going to be presenting that on August 9th. So we've got about a month, right, to get that input, to get those refinements done, to put that detail together for them to see, and then have all of that then presented in August, get their feedback, and continue to talk with you all through August in anticipation of the community meetings. So I think, Miriam, with that, I'll have you just walk through the goal framework.
Yeah, and as another reminder, we kind of introduced these criteria for evaluating and prioritizing, all of the possible strategies, which, in our collective judgment, do we think would have the most impact on addressing the housing needs we've identified? Which would be most cost efficient? Which strategies would make the most traction at the same relative cost? I think political alignment and community support is an important part of the conversation. I know we got feedback on some of those pieces last time that we definitely appreciated and incorporated, and I think eager to get everybody's kind of continued thinking about that with all the possible strategies. And then also, what is the existing level of capacity to implement the given strategy? Are there the partners in place today to make a strategy fully successful? Another thing to keep in the mix. So Justin showed those 5 strategies, and at our June 8th meeting, we walked through these in a little bit more detail, but if you remember, even at that meeting, it was like, we know this is a lot, and we're going to kind of provide a review of all of the ideas we put on the table, highlight some of the changes we've made based on feedback, and then, like Justin said, since this is so much, just really give you all some time to sit with it. We've actually created an online structured survey to collect your input over the coming week or so, because we really want to hear from every community member, committee member, and every community member, but that'll come later, every committee member. And at our next meeting, which I believe there might be another meeting proposed for July. At that next meeting, we want to share with you kind of the collective feedback. First big goal, reducing barriers to adding needed housing supply. So a lot of things here on the policy side, right? So zoning and land use, coordinating across the county with other municipalities that, of course, have those land use powers within the extent of their jurisdiction. Something that came up in our last discussion is this issue of vacant residential units. I believe it was Duncan who raised this. We thought that was a really important point. How even though there's not maybe the type of large-scale vacancy problem we see in other markets, there are these vacant units that could very well be adding quality housing options to the market where it's sorely needed. So digging into what might be incentives to bring those units back online, whether that is actually renovation support or tax treatment, right, that incentivizes people to fill their units. So we added that in. I think that is a really important point. Second, invest in creation and preservation of attainable housing. And here is where you start to see these green stars. So we've highlighted the strategic tools that really are at some level reliant on be actualized. There really, in many, many cases, is a need for a dedicated source of funding. So that's something that won't at all be lost, I believe, when we share this emerging framework beyond the committee. So, of course, the first is establish new gap financing sources for affordable housing development. Land banking, another really critical piece, in addition to zoning, of lining things up so there can realistically be projects developed with that gap financing source in mind. Thinking about county-owned lands and sort of a long-term strategy of disposition alongside land banking. Thinking about PIP and tax abatement as funding sources, or at least development mechanisms in a given district or site as a way to support affordable and workforce housing. And then here, thinking back to assessment policies, reviewing those to ensure that they're supportive of affordable housing to the maximum degree possible. That, of course, kind of factors into the tax abatement conversation. Third, kind of broad goal and set of possible strategies. Many of these, again, relying on funding, a funding source. So thinking about land incentive programs to help tenants who may otherwise have face significant barriers in finding quality, stable housing, create incentives to help landlords be open-minded, be more open-minded, give folks a chance. Really focusing on affordable housing preservation. So all of those existing dedicated units, just really developing gap financing sources, but also kind of a coalition to keep track of these things, to line these existing properties up for preservation at affordable and affordable rents and high quality. And then other policy tools. So, considering source of income protections. This is something a lot of municipalities are really taking a look at, so that holders of housing choice vouchers or Section 8 vouchers and other supplemental income supplements don't face discrimination in the housing market and can find a quality housing and they have to find it with that given source. And then legal counsel is has actually been shown to be a very effective for promoting housing stability and actually very cost effective in the long run. Policy barriers to shared equity models like cooperatives and making sure that those state policy issues are in the mix. And two, exploring property tax abatements or rebates for either low-income or long-time homeowners. So as property values in their neighborhood really rapidly appreciate, there's a way for people to get some support and relief and stay in their neighborhoods if they choose. And the fifth goal here really focused on capacity of the housing ecosystem. And so here is where really highlighting the importance of dedicated funding to advance these priorities. Also getting more and more diverse developers in the mix as partners in this work. Thinking about the major employers that also help invest in this priority. But we added this item based on discussion last time, so they're really coordinating. That's quick review, and like that, we really are eager to get input so get it to a point that the committee feels comfortable with what we share up to the council on the 9th, and then what we put out to the community when we're doing the workshops and other community engagement. Then Justin, I think you wanted to describe this exercise.
Unmute that. Thanks, Miriam. Another aspect of this, and I think Daryl was talking about it when we came into the meeting this afternoon, is not only are we working toward an understanding of, a comprehensive understanding of needs and how can we strategically meet those needs, but what are the resources that are available to the county and its partners to actually do those various strategies over the long term, and that's something that we will be putting forward. And so that universe of possible resources is also part of this conversation, and it starts to triangulate between the strategies and the resources available to the county, and how does the county effectively implement the plan. And so another part of this will be exploring what those various resources are. And you can see this is an example from another community. So it doesn't reflect that we've already done any sort of analysis here, but we just wanted to share this as an example of a future conversation that we'll have, where we will list and talk about the variety of sources that are available to a community to not only have not only to fund a long-term, dedicated source of funding that could be used for a variety of strategies, but also just different mechanisms that could be used when the opportunity arises to implement. And you can see here, it's property tax levy, it's a variety of building permit and developer impact fees, excise tax, using ARPA funds, which is clearly at the top of everyone's mind right now, real estate transfer taxes, short-term rental fees, sales tax, general fund, all of these are available to a local community in one form or another. But they also have some implications on their use and how effective the implementation of the strategy can be. So some of them are, they're an annual application of HUD funds or something like that, where, it may be a routine use, but it's being redirected from somewhere else. A property tax levy would have, more of a long-term sustaining effect of generating a revenue stream that can be counted on going forward. The ARPA funds, for example, a great awesome opportunity and an infusion of money in the short term that has some time constraints of how fast it needs to be spent and what it can be spent on. And so there's, some constraints about that. And so you can see these are just different ways that we will be thinking about and evaluating the variety of resources available to Charleston County, and then having that conversation sort of in tandem with you all as we move forward. This is a key piece of the housing strategic plan and the implementation plan aspect of that. And so just wanted to bring this up because I know the funding is really top of mind right now, and it's not all about goals and strategies. It's about how do we get those done. And I just Miriam and I wanted to throw this example up as a way to show you how we have thought about this in the past, and the conversation that we can kind of tee up for you all going forward.
Next question.
And I think we are just about finished here. The last thing before we jump into conversation is just to really give you a sense of next steps. As Miriam said, and we've said a couple times, we will be providing a link to a survey to help you all think through the variety of goals and strategies and start to help us prioritize that. We'll get that input from you all in the next week or so. A discussion about a possible extra July meeting, a presentation to council in early August. And then you can see we've got our August and September steering committee meetings and the November, our steering committee meetings laid out, I guess, really through the finalization of the plan, but also the community workshops coming up in September. And our last slide, but I think that's it. So I know that's a lot of information, but then I think the discussion will help us sort of tee this up for you. So certainly if you've got any questions about where we're going or what the current ask is, please don't hesitate. Happy to do that.
Well, y'all, thank you for all this. Certainly we have a lot to cover today. So I'd like to use this opportunity to have questions about what we've just received, and any future anything outside of this. Let's hold it for how they appear on the agenda, if that's okay with everyone else, just so we can stay organized and on time here. Mr. Cheney, you had a question, I believe.
Yeah, I have a question pertaining to the fundings breakdown slide. I thought that was a nice slide. Can you go back to that? Can you define what you mean by progressivity?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll ask, like Justin said, this is an example from another community that entirely different state, different options on the table. But yeah, I think progressivity would be an important consideration in every community, but that just refers to who is paying, basically. So, for example, a tax or fee or fine that affect relatively more wealthy affluent or just well-resourced communities would be relatively more progressive. That's just a kind of standard term, not needing to apply any sort of partisan or political tone to it. And by contrast, a regressive tax or fine or fee would put relatively larger burden or have relatively larger effect on lower income members of the community, whether that's through a property tax payment or any other number of it could be a sales tax, which is a tax that people often refer to as a relatively more regressive source, only because lower income people tend to spend a larger share of their income. They just have to on goods and services and aren't saving, aren't able to save or spend money other ways. So it's understood to affect them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think maybe another word, if you could chime in, would be equitable. And to kind of sidestep the potential partisan narrative, I think maybe just a more broad, nonpartisan word would be equitable. Would you say that's similar to what you mean by that? And so the more shaded in the circle is, the more equitable that source might be. Is that right?
Yeah, that is the
Okay, that's what I assumed. I didn't want to assume that though, without asking.
a not term. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
I mean, just looking at staying on that list, then I really feel like we're sort of at the point of a helping body to what happens now in front of the council the next time on August 9th, that we need to be looking at it through their eyes in the short term. Obviously, this is going to go far beyond the council, we're all trusting, but they're going to be the first stop to either give us a green light or say that we don't like this and you're done, or at least on a sideline as far as a referendum is concerned. So just thinking about a list like this, I don't think we should be showing this into the public, and I'm sure you probably didn't mean that, but I just want to make it clear from my point of view that we shouldn't have anything on a list like this that isn't already enabled by state law, for example, or wouldn't create distractions and bones of contention by the decision makers that we already use sales tax for X, Y, and Z purposes. I just, listening to the meeting last night, it was like we had a megaton elephant in the room, and each of the council members who paid attention to any extent of what they were being asked to do, I think we're grabbing on to the variety of parts of the elephant and never really got to any sort of, consensus understanding, let alone decision. So I think our body needs to be smoothing out their deliberations as opposed to throwing new things at them that they're going to focus on instead of what we're asking of them on August 9th. That's just my personal opinion about what we're needing to do.
Would you like me to respond to that, or I'm happy to just let that sit as a comment as well for you all. You let me know.
I mean, I'm happy to have a dialogue, yeah.
Yeah. So, so yes, I think, clearly this is not like this was just an example for us to have the conversation about, the idea that there are other things that we will be considering as part of the strategic plan that aren't just, a property tax mill levy, that
right.
A dedicated source of funding could come from other ways. And we were just trying to exemplify that, I think, as far as the completeness from the strategic plan standpoint. I think my initial reaction to your comment is that I think what we're trying to do, I think one of the things that we're being asked to do is to continue to focus on. This is about the strategic plan and the goals, the strategies, and the opportunities and resources for carrying that strategic plan out. It certainly informs, I think, the referendum, the mill levy referendum conversation. But I don't think, but we're not there trying to make an argument that the mill levy is the way to go or it's the only way to go. And I think what we've been asked to do is to say that we aren't just we, the consultant team and the plan, you know, within the planning of this strategic plan are not focused just on the referendum. And we've been asked that I think one of the things we want to be able to accomplish on that August 9th is to provide the framework. And part of that framework is not only the goals and strategy framework, but understanding the implementation framework, which is the variety of sources, and letting that all be presented and sat there. How that gets considered about from the council's perspective on whether or not to approve to put a mill levy on the ballot is, I think we're just trying to provide them with all of that information. And so we're not so fixated on the property tax mill levy for our purposes. And so I guess I felt like the comment was maybe we're distracting from that conversation. And I think what we're trying to do is provide a holistic understanding of what the framework is, which is what we've been asked. What is the framework? What is the plan? Part of that plan is also these variety of resources that we've been asked to provide. And so setting that all out in front of them while they deliberate, I think, is our goal.
I think another context that I think we can provide is how the timing of ARPA funds relates to some of these other options. They're just saying there's a long time shot and the restriction when funds need to be dedicated and then when funds need to be spent. And so I think that additional context we can provide alongside this.
Yeah, I mean, I really personally appreciate the bigger, body of work that you all are being hired to do, and it'll stand the test of time. I mean, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have this as an immediate animal in front of us. And so I do feel like, there's a lot of balancing and tension, potential so I guess at the bottom line then, I don't think you should be giving options of other types of funding that can be used that don't exist, here. I do think that would, cause a lot of, it might basically take away from some of the credibility that, the homework hasn't been done and that we're not even really dealing with an accurate, context within our own state. So that would be my bottom line suggestion about this. I mean,
Good, sounds good.
yeah.
Mr. Porter.
Yeah, this was not meant to be our first blush of what the recommendations should be for you all. It really was. We were just asked this today,
Right.
From the conversation that stemmed from council last night. So I
Right.
just want to be clear, like this was simply we need to have something to put in front of you all to have this very conversation. So I hear what you're saying loud and clear, and this will absolutely be vetted and understood
Yeah.
that these are applicable, and there may be an opportunity to put something up there that isn't, but then it would be clearly noted that this would require a legislative change or a policy direction or something. Or we may not touch that at all, but I think that's absolutely, we hear what you're saying on that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Actually, if I may add something.
Go ahead, Mr. Davis.
I think, yeah, thank you. We are, I would, if it was determined that this would be a better way or as good a way or whatever, and it is not currently allowable in state law, I would want it in a different section. I would not want it left out. But to say these are, because there are some long-term things that we're looking at that are going to be in the plan that are clearly not immediate options. So I
Right.
would want it in the plan in another location that says our long-term goal is to investigate these things.
Yeah, I think that's very strategic.
I mean, similar to how y'all did it with previous presentations, like these are the immediate short-term easy lifts, and these are the long-term play heavy lifts. Because yeah, some of these items are going to run conflict with state policy, and so yeah, as we kind of fine-tune this, if we can prioritize those in easily digestible items, and then ones that may take a little more finesse and long-term work. But thank you for clearing that up. Mr. Porter, I'm sorry.
In the creation and preservation category, I'd like to underscore the need for a landlord incentive program. I'll use an example to illustrate it. On Sunday, I listed one of my affordable units for rent. So it's been 3 days on market. I've had 121 inquiries so far, and it resulted in 32 rental applications. And for somebody at 80% AMI and below, if you put yourself in a landlord's shoes, they're not even close to, getting the unit. So, the county's going to have to step up and provide some gap financing there in order to incentivize landlords to rent to that population. And a note on the revenue
voucher program.
Yes, yeah, similar to that. And my thoughts on the revenue sources slide. The short-term rental fees, for example, that same long-term rental property would bring in roughly 3 times as much income as doing it on the long-term side. And the vacant house or vacant residential unit fee, in my mind, those have the strongest connections to the housing supply or lack thereof. So I would like to identify those 2 sources.
And I just want to be clear on what you said. I think what you meant was the short-term rental income is 3 times
Correct,
what a
yes.
long-term. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Woodward.
I'd like to speak to some of the conversations that Mr. Porter just said in terms of landlord incentives. Back in the 80s, HUD had a program called rental rehabilitation, where they would provide dollar for dollar to a landlord to bring their units up to standard. That landlord then had to sign an agreement for certain rent before they can raise their rents to a tenant. That may be a great incentive, and I was looking at that, going back to look at what Duncan had suggested to bring vacant units back online.
Right.
A lot of those units that's vacant are units that's owned by landlords, and they just don't have the money to go in and do 100% of rehab. So an incentive would probably help to bring those units back online. Just want to throw that out. Secondly, at the meeting on last night, when I went home, I was just like, what in the world happened here? The chairman got up and gave some terrific and harrowing statistics about the cost of housing and the need. And then I'm probably being recorded. I think that went over
Right.
anyone that needed to make a decision last night.
Yeah.
So.
We have a lot of education to
We'll
do.
prepare better
Yeah.
next time.
No, I don't think it was in your
Any-
preparation. I think it was in those that were hearing.
Right.
Did not receive what you were saying.
We don't have
and that
plowed
wasn't
ground.
important enough.
We haven't plowed the ground to
Yeah,
some
we-
extent of
I thought they perked up when you mentioned, remaining, economically viable and competitive, so people can move here and live here
Yeah.
and work here. That seemed to perk them up a little bit.
We'll learn and be ready for the 9th. Any other questions or comments on what we've just? Okay, I do want to say I appreciate this being multilingual. Were there any thoughts or considerations to other languages besides Spanish, or I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'll say we're very open to any feedback. We heard that Spanish is essential. If there are other languages that we should consider, we've actually had really good success with translation vendors. It can be pretty quick and really high quality, and so I think we have options to do whatever.
Okay. I think we may.
We're working on getting IT back in the room.
Okay.
Can they still hear?
Justin, Miriam, Daryl, can y'all hear us at all?
Yes, we can hear you. I think what's happening is that with your multiple mics, or maybe there's, I don't know, with whatever the room mics are, when somebody makes noise, it activates your mic and sort of supersedes ours. And so what I've noticed is that's happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, it's just breaking up at times, Miriam. That's all.
Yeah, you're breaking up some, but not.
Okay, I'll also speak
Okay. Well,
more into my mic.
Can
With
I?
the languages, we've heard that Spanish is just like a priority, but we're open to any feedback. I think translate, as we've done Mandarin as well, and I think we can do just whatever is needed and what works best.
no, I think Spanish is the priority. I just was curious. A couple other questions I had about the workshops. You mentioned the 12th, 13th, and 14th. The 14th, we have a committee meeting. How would that be organized? Would we do a public meeting and then a workshop afterwards? Or what were the thoughts around the 14th?
Yeah, so Miriam, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the workshops are going to be evening, perhaps late afternoon, early evening, or evening workshops on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So your steering committee meeting, as it's currently scheduled, would happen at its regular time, and then we'd move from the steering committee to the public workshop. That's the current plan.
Okay, thank you. And the last thing I'll want to hit on is the locations. Noticeably absent is Johns Island, West Ashley, James Island area. That's going to be a hot topic. Have we identified or considered a location in that general area?
I think Margaret can probably speak to that if she's there now.
I was good for here. We are working with the libraries.
Okay.
In those particular areas, and we will be scheduling those workshops. The library stands.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure.
James Island has like now a town hall event or some type of farmer's market or food night. Or something good option.
Okay.
Josh, talking about the
Ms. Jackson.
workshops, I think I'm sure you probably made it clear and I missed it, but when the public is invited to the workshops, and I know, Miriam, you said they'll be asked to give their input about the plan. So are we gonna, what version of the plan will be made available to the public during that September part of the engagement process? Or do we still need to decide that?
Well, it's the sort of the, what do you want to say, the latest version. I mean, it's so think of this as just sort of the development of the plan process. So I think that for sure they're going to see the goals, that they're going to see the strategies to the extent that we've started as a committee here and getting feedback from the community survey, started to get a sense of what priorities are. They'll start to see the synthesis of the funding conversation and the emergence of the implementation of those strategies from a short-term, medium-term, long-term perspective. So kind of they're going to be presented not with a draft plan. It's going to be presented with, here's where we are in the process, here's the goals, here's the strategies, here's the timing and the priorities that are emerging, and getting the feedback about that. So it's not, I don't want to confuse it to say that it's the draft plan.
Right. I mean, essentially what you've given us today then. I mean, I think that's a good, in my opinion, a good a level of detail combined with the main message or the goals. But you've also given people that, like to think, how would this actually look once we're approving a goal to work on? So you've got the possible strategic tools. So, I mean, I think if you just use this version and making sure that you've boiled down the potential resources into something that's doable now and doable if we work hard to advocate for it at the state level or wherever we think resources need to be adopted. So I think you've given us the version that the public would really most, feel like they've not been, talked down to in some sort of low-level, terminology that doesn't really mean anything. They've been given some meat on the bones with what you just gave us today.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I also want to make sure everyone is aware that some of these items are going to come to the forefront quicker than others. We are, as you all know, we've been tasked with coming up with a plan for the 20 million that council is expecting to get in the month of August. Right. So there will be many items from the list that you have in front of you that are going to be on the table before we actually get a draft plan together or even finish the framework.
I think that's to everyone's advantage. It's like, okay, we've got our pilot, we've got the little bit of resources. I think we should keep talking about the 20 million as the little bit of resources that we need in order to pilot a lot of the strategic tools that we know we need for the long haul as a county. So yeah. I think that's good.
And we'll get into that in just a minute. But closing up the update that we just received, any other comments or Mr. Riley, I'm sorry.
Just one question. Did we learn anything from the first survey that was put out there that we were looking at when we kind of started? Is that information helpful in how you set up the next one, or is there any feedback from that?
They are compiling the stats for us now. We ended up keeping it open longer than we initially intended to for logistical reasons. We had a very small staff and kind of had an issue getting it out to where it needed to get out to. So they sent me some very preliminary numbers, but they will be compiling a more detailed report for us, which we will share with you as soon as we get it.
Thanks. Mr. Logan.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Just wanted to make a comment too as well. I mean, I know last night at the meeting that was something that was brought up about, hey, we have this $20 million in place. Let's hold off on the referendum for a while. And I mean, although we do have that money in place, I think if we can, or within presenting this information, even like just, as you just mentioned, there are going to be some immediate things that come out of that, but is there a way that we can make sure we outline what those immediate things are, funding that, how that funding breakdown would be to support those things, to then encourage the idea that, hey, we still need a lot more money to make sure that we can get a lot of these things done too as well. Because I just felt like in council last night, they were just saying, hey, we got these $20 million. Somebody even mentioned holding off for 4 or 5 years before something. And I mean, majorly, if we're looking at the need that we have right now, that's not going to do anything in there. So just making sure we can eloquently convey that conversation over to council whenever we do present this information, I think is important also.
May I insert something?
Yes, ma'am.
I think at one time we had talked about stories, telling stories. I don't know, after last night's meeting, I don't know how convincing our council would be, but I don't think that we need to keep that part out. And this is the reason. In the last 4 weeks, I have heard about 4 or 5 horrible stories about families. One family house burnt. They were renting, no renters insurance, so then they were living in their car. The Booster Club at North Charleston High School had to put them up in a hotel for $2,000 something for 4 weeks. So where are they going to go after that? One young lady called and said, I was paying $1,300 in rent. My landlord went up on me $700. Single mom of 2. And I can tell you more stories. I'm serious. And I think that our council really needs to know the criticalness of getting something done now and not 4 or 5 years, 10 years down the line. So somewhere along the line in our workshops, before them, we need to put these stories in front of them.
And I think the workshops are the place to do that. We're getting a little bit behind here. Justin and Miriam, let's move on into the next one, the discussion of the framework and how you would like to package that, what you need from us. Let's kick off that conversation, and I'll let y'all take it, and I'll mediate the questions from here.
Yes, so we can, I think what would be the best use of time for today is to just be available to answer any questions that anyone might have specific to those, right, Miriam? Because what we're going to provide is a link to a survey that'll give you the ability to prioritize within the goals, give us feedback on why you picked certain priorities. Is there anything on there that should come off, or that you would recommend, be put at the bottom, or anything that we missed? I think the survey instrument will be, the direction we would want you all to focus on providing that feedback, especially just because it's expedient. I don't think we can't dive into it as a group today. So really, I think what I'd rather do is you all will have in front of you the full, the full level of information on the goals and the various strategies, and what I'm going to call the strategy sheets, to be able to look at those within each goal and have that inform your priorities and your input, and just do it electronically. And that we could focus today's effort on just, does anybody have right now a specific question that they see, that they know from the overview that Miriam provided? Hey, I've got this particular question I want to know before I let Miriam and Justin go and I go do the survey.
I'll open it up to the floor. I have a host of questions, but we'll give everyone the opportunity first. Nobody. Okay. Ms. Cheney?
Sorry.
This is probably thank you, a long shot. I think the silence from the committee is probably just because I can't speak for everyone, but I think it's really thoughtful, comprehensive, good. I'm just dropping pages and wanted to know if there's a way to get it all on one page. And certainly, I know there are attempts at that with the I don't know if you can see me, but the 5 goals. But some of the meat that's on the strategy sheets that you defined are great. And so as we kind of think about packaging this and realize that our interest is broad in this, other people's interest might just be a page worth. Just wanted to share that as a thing on the list as we begin to package this moving forward.
Duncan, I don't, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Hunter?
Duncan, I know that we have a housing needs assessment that has gone out, which is like a 3-page summary. Is that something that you're looking for more so than the full packet?
Well, I think is the housing needs assessment different than the framework?
No, it's
That's
the same.
what we discussed at the June 22nd meeting. It was the 4-pager that Justin and Miriam
Okay.
compiled.
I might have missed that meeting.
Yeah, you were.
Okay.
Okay. There's
No, you
a
were.
it's,
No, you
it's
were there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You spelled
Sorry.
your name wrong.
Just trying to
yeah, it's a 3-pager. Hold on, I've got it here.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more concise and
We
to
were
the
talking
point.
about it last time, sorry, that it would be the higher level summary that would go to the council for last night's discussion. And then it didn't, so we haven't produced it for anybody yet.
Oh, okay. Oh, I don't have it with me.
Okay.
I can email
Well,
it to you.
anyway, I'm sure it exists. Thanks.
Okay.
Any other?
Well, quickly to respond to the suggestion that Saul, like on one page, we can definitely do that. I think another thing we were just discussing internally is maybe it would be helpful because each of these strategic tools advances a goal, but some are policies, some are programs, and maybe making some of those distinctions would help somebody take it all in at a first blush. So, yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, just to distill this all onto a single page. We can work on that.
Okay. So I think what we really need to discuss, if there's no other questions,
One question.
go ahead, Mr. Logan.
Just, so as we prepare this for council, are they looking for a more strategic framework or are they looking for a plan? Do we know kind of what they're expecting?
I think we need to provide a framework, allow for subsequent meetings to kind of fill out more of the detail. Ultimately, I think the piece that's going to determine the success of the overall strategy are the public engagements, providing that dialogue, and that will set up the finishing work that Justin and Miriam are doing. And then, whenever that presentation happens, end of September, early October. So, we kind of need to do this in steps, but I think what I took from council last night was, they need some outline of a plan. And that's the goal today is, can we discuss that framework, get into a comfortable position to set up other meetings, and then, be ready for that August 9th. August 9th is really when all this is gonna come together. So that is my interpretation. Talking with Mr. Davis, I believe that's his. We're all on the same page as far as that is concerned. So that is the expectation at this point. Obviously, council would like a full vetted plan sooner rather than later, and if we need to add additional meetings, we're going to have that conversation at the end of this meeting, but we need to be working towards giving council material. Okay. Ms. Woodward.
My interpretation of the meeting that I sat in last night, every council member that spoke said they haven't seen a plan. Where is the plan? No one said anything about a framework. So I think that maybe staff or somehow someone get it to the council that we're just going to be maybe in August presenting them with a framework and not a plan. Because if they're continue saying a plan, they're expecting a plan. And it's not feasible.
I think you're exactly right. And what we've talked about so far in terms of this next meeting with council is that we will have the outlines of an actual plan. Because like I said, We also have to present a budget for the 20 million, which we will frame as a lead up to this larger funding source, to this more permanent source or what have you. So we will present that some very concrete items that will be the beginning of an actual plan. We will not address the more long-term options and those kind of things, but we will talk with some detail and specificity about what will happen over the next three to 4 years, and how we intend to deploy the $20 million that they have set aside, and some of the other non-financial items that we will be getting started. Like we'll be working with the planning department to monitor how successful the Zeldar changes were and those kinds of things. So they will be getting some specificity. So the staff will step in, we will present, and we will say, here is the beginning of your plan. This is our action, these are our action items over the next 3 to 4 years, and then we will sort of step off and allow the conversation to take place about funding. The other thing about that is we want to make sure that what happened last night, where the plan and the source kind of become one conversation, we want to make sure that those conversations stay separate as much as possible.
So I don't think there's a lot of need to revisit the strategic goals. I think those are laid out clearly. I think we can continue to expound on those and develop those concepts and theories. Obviously, there's a lot of breakdown in communication with funding streams. What we just received, the previous update, you talk about the possible revenue and how all these different funding streams can play together. I don't believe the committee has ever said that the mill is the only solution. It is part of the grander scheme. So can we explore, as we try to set up the framework, how all these different funding options play together? What have you seen in other markets that have worked? Your analysis so far of our current market, what do you think would work, what may not work? I believe we can provide some on-the-ground expertise of what may not work. But I think for the next 15, 20 minutes, if we could kind of dig into the revenue piece of this and talk about the grander overall framework and how all these moving parts play together.
And I think, well, I'm sort of pausing because I think that would be what we were planning to do at your next, if you added a July meeting. I think we would be more prepared to have that conversation at the July meeting, because we will have provided, that would be the opportunity where we've done the vetting that has been asked for, and like not just showing you an example from another state where we'd have that list and would get into those details before the August council meeting. If we want to have a conversation and where we could just have Miriam throw up that list from that other example and use that as a framework for conversation, Mr. Chairman, happy to take that conversation if that's the conversation we want to have. We can absolutely start now, because it'll help us just be that ahead of the curve over the next 2 weeks before your next meeting. Is that?
Yeah, I don't, my expectation is not to settle on anything, but I think that's what we need to get around as far as what we need to decide on, and give you some direction as far as what we need to tee up for the next meeting. So if that's okay, I would, can we start that conversation? Ms. Jackson.
Absolutely. I think you just, there you go.
Thank you. I do think it's a very important exercise that will hopefully turn into much more of a game plan than an exercise. I guess I'm sort of, and I know this is, maybe it's my own personal concerns, but I can't get out of the way of the fact that when I left the council, and I didn't stay for the full meeting, I left at the end of the finance committee meeting where they had decided to put these 2 new meetings on the council's docket so that they could drill down specifically in the referendum, the decisions that are going to inform them to feel comfortable or proud that they're putting a referendum on the ballot, and then the language that needs to go with that. So I don't see how we. So what I would hope that we could do as a committee at this moment is more strategically decide how much do we want them to focus on the other sources as opposed to what they're geared up to focus on, which is the referendum source. And what I feel like I heard from them, as disparate as it was and all over the place, but that, like Henrietta said, they don't feel comfortable that we have their back, that there is a plan that they can go out and tell their constituents to vote yes on the referendum without, falling short of whatever mistrust or suspicions or whatever people were stating 2 years ago. So I think that what we need to do as a committee, and it's our credibility too. I mean, right? We've done a lot of work, starting with the consultant team, and so we have our credibility to sort of shore up and make more appreciated and respected. And I think to do that, we have got to put, as Daryl said, we've got the uses of the 20 million that they all talked about at some point in time last night. That is our model project for how the rest of money could be used over a recurring source period of years. And if we come in with that as something we support, and then we say, and here's where what those details, those specific uses of funds are going to fit into the overall framework and the strategies that we've all agreed on are the most important, then I don't really think, I personally, if I were sitting in their seats, I wouldn't want to go down the rabbit trail of, well, what's it going to look like to take sales tax out of people's pockets, in competition to a property tax increase, or however they're going to get themselves in a different way of thinking about this. So I personally, Mr. Chairman, would rather have our consultants go off and drill down on which other sources are even, or put them in categories. Available now, politically, maybe nerve-wracking, and not at all possible until we work with the state legislature and have that in our toolkit for being there on August 9th. But I wouldn't want us to lead with that. I don't think the council is educated enough, I'm sorry to say, based on how they were even talking about, the cost of housing, how you actually put the capital stack together and do housing that's going to be permanently subsidized or have any sort of deep affordability in the ranges that we know we really need to be most dedicated to. So I think we can't assume anything at this point about their level of knowledge.
Senator.
Agreed. Again, from the meeting that I attended last night, I think that, they're asking for something. They're asking for a framework. They want to know what we have been working on and how we can move forward. So what I'd like to suggest, Mr. Chairman, is that we, at least as a committee, is that we vote that we approve these 5 strategic goals so that we can give the consultants the opportunity to present this to council, because that is what they were asking for last night. They want something, because we don't want them alone with their own thoughts, basically. We want to let them know this is what we're working on. This is what, and this is going to lead us down the road. This is our framework here. And so that's my suggestion.
Are you making a motion or a suggestion?
I'm going to make a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Are we going to allow it to be amended at our next meeting up until August the 9th?
I mean, we can.
Okay.
We can.
As long as it's a meeting that then we can put something in front of them by August 9th. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing, hearing none. Call for a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we have a motion. Thank you. All right. Well, that kind of takes care of number 8. Well, let's move on. Mr. Davis, you want to talk about the ARPA funds and where we are and what your plan of action is for that?
Sure. I got into that just a little bit as part of the previous conversation, but we intend to have a full ARPA budget ready for council. Well, this was before they added the extra meeting. Our original intent was that the first meeting back from summer break, we would give them a full budget for the entire remaining 50 million of ARPA funds, or 40 million, roughly, that's unallocated. And then we would drill down into the 20 million that was dedicated to housing. That timeline is going to have to shift a little bit because they're going to need to see. So I'm going to talk with the DCA's office to see exactly how she wants to approach that now that we have all these other things on the table. So before I get too deep into that, I want to talk to Christine to see how she wants to approach it. But there will be a draft budget for the 20 million as well as an overall budget for the remaining 40 million. So council can see how all of that is shaping up. So until I have that conversation, I'm not gonna dig down too much into that, but you guys will be getting a draft probably at your next meeting.
Okay. And a lot of moving parts with regards to this. I know you and I have had a conversation, but just for the good of the group, what is the expectation of this committee? I mean, obviously that wasn't in our original mission or charter. This has all kind of come together in the last weeks or months. So can you just walk us through what you intend? What is our expectation as far as weighing in, giving advice, vetting?
Sure.
Thank you.
So we will present that draft budget to the committee and ask the committee to vote to recommend it. I would imagine because of time constraints, that we would have any discussions and amendments and changes to that budget right there on site. So we'll try to get it to you as early as possible, so that when we come to the meeting, folks can give their input and feedback and those sorts of things, and that we could make any amendments, changes, or what have you, and then vote to send that to council as a joint recommendation between staff and the committee. If there are any discrepancies there, then, obviously it would go to council with that, but I don't expect there will be. But yes, the committee will have an opportunity to review it, comment on it, and suggest changes before I ask for votes to send it to council.
And let me clarify for the record, the ARPA money does not flow through this committee, but common sense is we want it to be in tandem with what this committee is doing. So the input will be for collaborative sake, not for process.
Understood.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
And just so we know how to do the workload, is this for the August 9th meeting or August 11th or the regularly scheduled council August meeting that they would be receiving this information?
Well, as I said, it was originally for the regularly scheduled office meeting, but last night changed our calculus. So I don't know if Ms. Durant wants to address that now, or if we want to talk about that and then let you know.
I think
That's
we need to
fine.
consult with the chairman, because as Mr. Davis said, everything related to the consultant's update, the framework, the 20 million for housing, everything was set for the August meeting. Now there's a new August meeting.
Right.
So we need to consult with the chairman and set that to the list.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on what our expectation or need is. Okay. I believe that kind of wraps up all the things that we needed to address in today's meeting. Justin and Miriam, with these new kind of floating calendars out there, what would your preferred, what would you like us to do as far as schedule? Because we're not scheduled to meet again until August the 12th, I believe. I'm sorry.
August 13th.
13th. Thank you. Obviously, we need to address that. Some of the thoughts that have been floated around would be potentially scheduling another full committee meeting, but then also understanding that we can't do this too large of a group because we would need a quorum. Would smaller work groups? What would be preferred from you?
Which I apologize, it is the 10th, if that's the Wednesday.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. 10th. Thank you. Yeah, we meet the 9th. The council meets the 9th. We're the 10th, and then the full council is the 11th. Thank you.
Who was that question directed to?
Justin and Miriam. So I believe y'all are going to be driving the conversation the next meeting or two. So what do you need from us?
Right. So, Miriam, jump in here. I mean, I think the two things I'll put on the table, and Miriam can flesh that out if I'm missing anything. But I think the first thing is that we will immediately follow up today with a link to the survey that will start to allow you all to kind of systematically work through all of the information that you've got in front of you and help us start to prioritize and think about the strategies. And that will go out today, and we'll keep that open for about a week and start to get that feedback. So if we're working through a calendar like that, let's say that closes around the 20-ish, right? Let's say that's a week. If we had a steering committee meeting on the 27th, that would give us a week to sort of crunch and think about the input that we've received from you all via the survey and be able to package the beginnings of what we would be presenting to council on the 9th. And then we would use that meeting on the 27th, again, if that's the extra meeting date, to say, here's the emerging, we have a framework, you all voted on that, but here's the emerging detail that we're hearing from you on priorities and timing. Here's some additional information we've been able to provide to talk about, to start talking about implementation, which includes funding. And here's that package, and use that then to facilitate a conversation with you all on the 27th and get feedback on that. And then that would give us, what would that give us? That would give us a week. That would give us about a week then to take that input and continue to refine the presentation that we would give the council on the 9th. How's that for a starting point? I'm happy to, let's discuss.
No, okay. So a potential meeting on the 27th. Can everyone
Yeah,
look
that
at?
was my long-winded way of saying a potential meeting on the 27th.
You're fine.
I can only do the morning.
Okay. How about everyone else?
Works for me.
Regular time.
Regular time? Okay. So it sounds like we can have a quorum at our regular time. that okay with everyone? Not for you? Okay.
I'll say that throw out the third as also a possible time. I think that might give us a little bit more time that we need to be fully ready to have a full discussion with you all, and then still enough time to revise before a presentation on the 9th.
Let me mention before we move it too far forward, because we're doing a meeting on Tuesday and Thursday instead of Thursday and Tuesday, the packets have to go out to council. Typically, they go out 7 days before the meeting, the Friday before the Thursday. So we're probably going to need something to go out to them earlier than would be possible if we scheduled it on the 3rd. It's kind of strange that they moved it to a Tuesday, Thursday, so that would mean we would send it out typically then the 3rd, it would go to council if we follow our standard process for notifying them of the packets. I can confirm that with the clerk's office, but I don't know that I haven't. We don't want them to feel it's rushed.
So they're expecting to talk about this topic, or at least the referendum, on both those dates, right? The 9th and the 11th.
Yes, at first it was proposed to all be on the 9th, and then it was decided that they would split it between the 9th and the 11th.
That's what I heard last night.
Maybe everything I heard, but yes.
So I think also, I'm just looking at our calendars now and realizing, Miriam is out next week on vacation. So that, that. Well, I think, we're stuck with the 9th, and we need to roll back from that. And so I think what I would say is if it can't be, if I heard Christine correctly, we couldn't really push it too much forward because we'll have to have time to refine from the steering committee meeting. Would it be possible for you all to entertain possibly doing something on Friday the 29th?
I'm available.
Miriam, does that help us?
I'll be virtual.
I will be virtual.
Miriam, I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Oh, just that, we'll make happen. What needs to happen.
Oh, sure, and absolutely, and I'm just, right, and so I think the other option is if we leave it on the 27th, I think it is just an acknowledgement then that it'll be, at a level that we will be able to have a conversation. It may be in maybe more of a draft form than it would have been otherwise, but I think the intent then is to really be able to have that conversation, and we can make all of the refinements based on that conversation.
Right.
Going forward, you won't see nothing, that's for sure. So I guess maybe it is just the path of least resistance to leave it on the 27th, and we'll commit to having whatever that draft is and a really good conversation with you all. And then that will give us that whole week then to make those revisions in advance of the council packet.
Okay.
I see on my end, my team's kind of nodding their heads. So sorry for throwing that wrinkle out there, but I think that's fine. I think we'll.
All right.
Or Miriam can take us all along on vacation like I did.
Yeah,
Okay.
You guys like camping?
So we are going to schedule an additional meeting on July the 27th, regular time. Okay. Thank you for organizing that. And if we need to do something that first week of August, hopefully we can get it all addressed on the 27th. Okay. Any other final comments? We'll go around the room. Mr. Dukes? Rhodes? Mr. Porter? Ms. Bowley? Ms. Jackson? Mr. Logan?
Just want to thank y'all for the work that you're doing on this for us. I know it's, I don't know how this compares to other counties you've worked with, but again, just thank you for it.
Ms. Cheney?
Just quickly, I think, witnessing in the newspaper, witnessing conversations around town, there seems to be an either or, thinking either it's the 20 million or it's the referendum, but the need is $67 million a year in gap funding. And so this committee really needs to be advocating for that and educating that even our 2 mills isn't going to get us there. 20 million is not going to get us there. It's not either or, it's both if we want to even make a dent in this. So thank you for your excellent work.
Ms. Woodward?
The only comment I want to make today is that I would really like to thank the staff that's here. They're doing a fantastic work. They respond when quickly as possible, and they're always here. So sometimes I know that you feel like you're forgotten, but you're not. Thank you for your service to this committee. And that's it.
Ms. Hunter?
Thank you.
Let's get this done. That's it.
Justin, Miriam, any?
One last item. We've been denied the use of this room because of its limited recording capability, but from my perspective, I think it went well using our own equipment. So we may end up staying in this room if that sounds like that's what the committee wanted. Does that work for everybody?
That is the preference of the committee.
Thank you.
Maybe another table or something.
Mr. Davis, any other final comments?
That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay.
Enjoy Texas.
Thank you, everyone. We'll call the meeting adjourned.
Better you than us.
Why is Daryl in Texas?
Son got married.
Oh.
My mother-in-law was in town, so I missed the
Carol.
You, Greg?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
Oh, cool. I tried to.